Section 1 of Chills and Fever. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Christopher Freed. Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. Agitato, ma non troppo. I have a grief, it was not stolen like a thief, albeit I have no bittern by the lake to cry it up and down the brake. None there hath been like Dante's fury, when Beatrice was given him to bury, except when the young heart was hit. You know how Percy Shelley's reed sang tremolo? If grief be in his mind, where is his fair child moaning in the wind? Where is the white frost snowing on his head? When did he stalk and weep and not loll in his bed? I will be brief. Assuredly I have a grief, and I am shaken, but not as a leaf. End of section 1. Section 2 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Spectral Lovers. By night they haunted a thicket of April mist, as out of the rich ground strangely come to birth, else two immaculate angels fallen on earth. Lovers they knew they were, but why unclasped, unkissed? Why should two lovers go frozen asunder in fear? And yet they were. Over the shredding of an April blossom, her thrilling fingers touched them quick with care. With many delicate postures she cast a snare. But for all the red heart beating in the pale bosom, her face, as of cunningly tinctured ivory, was hard with an agony. Stormed by the little batteries of an April night, passionate being, the essences of the field, should the penetrable walls of the crumbling prison yield and open her treasure to the first clamorous night? This is the mad moon, and must I surrender all? If he but ask it, I shall. And gesturing largely to the very moon of Easter, mincing his steps and swishing the jubilant grass, and beheading some field flowers that had come to pass, he had reduced his tributaries faster, had not considerations pinched his heart, unfitly for his art. Am I reeling with the sap of April like a drunkard? Blessed is he that taketh this richest of cities, but it is so stainless, the sack were 1,000 pities. That is that marble fortress not to be conquered, lest its white peace in the black flame turn to tinder and an unutterable cinder. They passed me once in April in the mist. No other season is it, when one walks and discovers two clad in the shapes of angels, being spectral lovers, trailing a glory of moon gold and amethyst, who touch their quick fingers, fluttering like a bird whose song shall never be heard. End of section 2. Section 3 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Bells for John Whiteside's daughter. There was such speed in her little body, and such lightness in her footfall. It is no wonder that her brown study astonishes us all. Her wars were bruited in our high window. We looked among orchard trees and beyond, where she took arms against her chateau, or harried unto the pond the lazy geese, like a snow cloud dripping their snow on the green grass, tricking and stopping, sleepy and proud, who cried in goose, alas, for the tireless heart within the little lady with rod that made them rise from their noon apple dreams, and scuttle goose fashion under the skies. But now go the bells, and we are ready. In one house we are sternly stopped to say we are vexed at her brown study, lying so primly propped. End of section 3. Section 4 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Winter Remembered. Two evils, monstrous either one apart, possessed me, and were long and loath at going. A cry of absence, absence in the heart, and in the wood the furious winter blowing. Think not, when fire was bright upon my bricks, and past the tight boards hardly a wind could enter, I glowed like them, the simple burning sticks, far from my cause, my proper heat and centre. Better to walk forth in the murderous air, and wash my wound in the snows, that would be healing, because my heart would throb less painful there, being caked with cold, and past the smart of feeling. And where I went, the hugest winter blast would have this body bowed, these eyeballs streaming, and though I think this heart's blood froze not fast, it ran too small to spare one drop for dreaming. Dear love, these fingers that had known your touch, and tied our separate forces first together, were 10 poor idiot fingers not worth much, 10 frozen parsnips hanging in the weather. End of section 4. Section 5 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Triumph. Athens, a fragile kingdom by the foam, assumed the stranger's yoke. But then behold how meek those unbred Caesars grew, who spent their fruits of Rome forever after, trying to be Greek. I too shook out my locks like one born royal, for she dissolved in tears, and said my barbarous name, and took my oath, she was so piteous and loyal. Vote the young Caesar triumph, spread his fame. But oh, I find my captive was not caught, it was her empty house that fell before my legions. Of where her soul inhabits I have conquered not, it is so far from these my Roman regions. End of section 5. Section 6 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. 2 sonnets. 1. Yea. It was beside the fire that I had lit, out of the rain that drummed upon my roof. She leant against my bosom, fluttering it, and stared beyond my world, far, far aloof, and neither spoke, and thus we might have sat till angry Gabriel trumpeted for change. But she said, Heart of stone, look not like that. O unconcessive husband, you are strange. For joy I could not answer, being taxed by such a star, so distant in the sky, with being cold. But think how the poor heart waxed, the chidden wonder of women, the huge eye. And I played the god, disdaining her no more, I smiled, and drew her closer than before. 2. Nay. With such strong arms I shut my love about, she rested there, which was to me a token this was a house she never could walk without, securely bricked, and never to be broken. But no, the tight imprisonment was vain, too physical and wide to catch a heart. When we had come most near, and scarce were twain, some soul was still unmet and much apart. Therefore I knew the most unperjured lips that ever sweetly bargained love's exchange must lie. Love must be blacked with this eclipse, that she and I could live and still be strange. And as for death, whose stroke dissevers men? What fool would hope for firm possession then? End of section 6. Section 7 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Spring Posy. Running to meet us came neighbors' daughters nigh, fluting like birds, and calicoed bright and clean, and beautiful else had been their bosoms powdering by. But ye are a cloud, I said, too much between. I was waylaid in a depth of woody grot. Was it a fox in his fern? Was it a wing's blue sheen? In her widow's weed the balsam? But how ye prospered not, when full of her images, I saw not your scene. Up once I rose, in a fury of herd of things, to travel the splendid spear that twirleth in its fame. But the wars, and ships, and towns, and pestilent roaring kings, these angered me, and why? They fought on knowing her name. End of section 7. Section 8 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. To a lady celebrating her birthday. Too quick the annual sun returns, mounts to the ledge, and scans the pillowed face whereon 4 seasons hardly have writ the trace, though even he on his timeless circuit mourns that faintlier his fire burns. Bring proper gifts to beauty then. Bring topaz, emeralds, gold, and minerals rare, musk that will ever be sweet on mortal air, bright stiff brocades outlasting the short kin of usual mortal men. Bring only tokens fixed and sure. Bring kind affections, merited deep and strong, and though poor hearts never have lasted long, swear splendidly to how they shall perdure, as true as now, as pure. But bring no gift of trembling flowers, dear comrade, never on pain of pain suppose from the blowing of any little wasted rose upclomb the enemy in the airy towers to number beauty's hours. Ah, but I think you clearly know, sure eyes, you have observed on what hard terms beauty has respite from voracious worms. Her moment comes, thereafter fast or slow her daily funerals go. Dear love, rise up and proudly sing, for even foreboding soldiers deep at night make up no prayers against tomorrow's fight. They fling sweet oaths on high, not honoring the dismal nearing thing. Come to the company and play, for even that sinful Babylon, when surprised, put not her sackcloth on, nor sacrificed. The revel roared, and few stood off to stay and greet the mournful day. Unearthed liquors were poured out, the burghers dined, in no constricted rage at sudden death as fearsomer than age. The harlots danced, the elders at least with shout tossed brittle bones about. Small, small my heart inclines to boast. What can a virtuous, poor, pale lover do, who's prey to dissolution quick as you? This day smells mortuary more than most to me upon my post. Know this, though desperate are cases. Thus will I hold you out of other harms, till these be palsied paralytic arms. Then be we grizzled poles and yellow faces in these respective places. End of section 8. Section 9 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Vaunting Oak. He is a tower unleaning, but he may break if heaven in a rage try him too windily. And what uproar tall towers concumbent make! More than 100 years, more than 100 feet of timeless trunk that is too vast to shake. Only the temporal twigs are abashed on their seat. And the frail leaves of a season, which are susceptive of the mad humors of wind, and turn and beat ecstatic around the stem on which they are captive. But he casts the feeble generations of leaf, and naked to the spleen of the cold skies eruptive that howl on his defiant head in chief, bears out their frenzy to its period, and hears in the spring a little more roomy and deaf, after the tragedy the lyric palinode. Now a certain heart, too young and mortally yoked with an unbeliever of bitter blood, observed as an eminent witness of life the tree, and she exulted, being given to crying, "Heart, heart! Love is so firm an entity, it must not go the way of the hot rose dying. For the venerable oak, delivered of his pangs, put forth his flames of green with profuse joying, and testified to her with innumerable tongues. And what but she fetched me up to the steep place where the oak vaunted? A meadow of many songs had to be traversed, and a quick populace of daisies and yellow kinds. And here she knew, who had sorely been instructed of much decease, better than brag in this distraught purlieu. But above the little in their dusty tombs was he standing, sheer on his hill, soiled by few of the knobs and broken boughs of an old tree, and she murmured, "He is established, you see, forever." But thinking that she had lied too piteously, I knocked on his house loudly, a sorrowing lover, and drew forth like a funeral a hollow tone. Largely, the old gentleman is, I grieved, cadaver. Before our joy shall have lapsed, even he is gone. I knocked more sternly, and his dolorous cry boomed till its round reverberance had outdone the singing of bees, or the coward birds that fly. Otherwhere with their songs when summer is sped, and if they stayed, would perish miserably, or the tears of a girl remembering her dread. End of section 9. Section 10 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Christopher Freed. In process of a noble alliance. Reduce this lady unto marble quickly, ray her beauty on a glassy plate, rhyme her youth as fast as the granite, take her where she trembles, and do not wait, for now in funeral white they lead her and crown her queen of the house of no love. A dirge then for her beauty, musicians, ye harping the springe that catches the dove. End of section 10. Section 11 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Christopher Freed. Parting at Dawn. If there was a broken whispering by night, it was an image of the coward heart, but the white dawn assures them how to part. Stoics are born on the cold glitter of light, and with the morning star lovers take flight. Say then your partings, and most dry should you drain your lips of their wine, your eyes of the frantic rain, till these be as the barren Cenobite. And then, O dear sir, stumbling down the street, continue till you come to wars and wounds. Beat the air, madam, till your house clock sounds, and if no Lethe flows beneath your casement, and when 10 years have brought no full effacement, philosophy was wrong, and you may meet. End of section 11. Section 12 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Christopher Freed. Miriam Tazewell. When Miriam Tazewell heard the tempest bursting, and his wrathy whips across the sky drawn crackling, she stuffed her ears for fright like a young thing, and with heart full of the flowers went to weeping. But the earth shook dry his old back in good season. He had weathered storms that drenched him deep as this one, and the sun, Miriam, ascended to his dominion. The storm was withered against his empyrean. After the storm she went forth with skirts kilted, to see in the strong sun her lawn deflowered, her tulip, iris, peony, strung and pelted, pots of geranium spilled, and the stalks naked. The spring transpired in that year with no flowers, but the regular stars went busily on their courses. Suppers and cards were calendared, and some bridals, and the birds demurely sang in the bitten poplars. To Miriam Tazewell the whole world was villain, to prosper when the fragile babes were fallen. The principle of the beast was low and masculine. For weeks she went untidy, she went sullen. End of section 12. Section 13 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Christopher Freed. Here lies a lady. Here lies a lady of beauty and high degree. Of chills and fever she died, of fever and chills, the delight of her husband, her aunts, an infant of 3, and of medicos marveling sweetly on her ills. For either she burned, and her confident eyes would blaze, and her fingers fly in a manner to puzzle their heads. What was she making? Why, nothing. She sat in a maze of old scraps of laces snipped into curious shreds. Or this would pass, and the light of her fire decline till she lay discouraged and cold as a thin stalk white and blown, and would not open her eyes, to kisses, to wine. The 6th of these states was her last, The cold settled down. Sweet ladies, long may ye bloom, and toughly I hope ye may thole. But was she not lucky? In flowers and lace and mourning, in love and great honor we bade God rest her soul after 6 little spaces of chill and 6 of burning. End of section 13. Section 14 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. The tall girl. The queens of hell had listened necks to crane at the tall girl approaching with long tread, and, when she was caught up even with them, nodded. If the young miss with gold hair might not disdain, we would esteem her company over the plain, to profit us all where the dogs will be out barking, and we'll walk by the windows where the young men are working, and tomorrow we will all come home again. But the Queen of Heaven on the other side of the road, in the likeness, I hear, of a fine motherly woman, made a wry face, despite it was so common to be worsted by the smooth ladies of hell, and crisped her sweet tongue. This never will come to good. Just an old woman, my pet, that wishes you well. End of section 14. Section 15 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Fall of Leaf. With a rocking and guffawing, winter set his wind to blowing. Oaken leaves of pale or brown, hickory leaves of sere, leaves of ash that tumbled down, weary, weary were. Farthest from the living green, the sumac pitched his blood-red scene, but pale or red the leaves were failing, his dear heart's and hers. Dick and Dorothy were quailing, summer foresters. Dick and Dorothy look forth, and every quarter is a north. Each old comrade is forlornest, bush and trumpet vine and tree. Is it jest, or in good earnest goes the sombre colloquy? Dorothy, the years played out, his green young armies all en route. Some are pale, and some are bleeding, green the summer long, and the rattle-throats are pleading with a foe too strong. Dick, the play is done for them, and every leaf that grows on stem, and leaves and lovers have in common that the leaves are dry and blown, and the husk of man and woman withers on the bone. Dorothy, we grow no younger, need we play it any longer? Methinks eastward is a gate rusted, and a slim white spire. Go tell them you come cold and late to help them tend their fire. Dick, those are the Holy Rood, and sweet St. Margaret's sisterhood. Fearful are the maids, nor many, narrow is their bed. They must open not to any wood-wife wrapped in red. Dorothy, then westward come where the night bells promise home, for the arduous dome is black, but the gate is golden. They will joy to have us back, loyal and beholden. Dick, they tend St. Gregory's tomb, the strictest monks in Christendom, tenants of a godly house, of cleanly gear and hallowed. They will think but little use of woodmen stained and yellowed. Dorothy, then will you tell the way that goes from lovers' hell? All the potent charms are said, we that clasp are cold and wearied. Heartless lovers are as dead that walk the earth unburied. Dick, they found the ending good, the babes that ventured in the wood. So tell the leaves that die and fall, as we lie a shiver, stop and stitch us one close pall to hide us deep forever. End of section 15. Section 16 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Rapunzel has submitted herself to fashion. Rapunzel and Rapunzel, all this day will I cry upon you, accusing, was it well how the old witch has enviously undone you? Undone of your tangled snare by which the midnight moon was sifted and stranded, forlorn of the rippling stair whereon the secret lover had ascended. For when it came to night, and the breath shortening of the most shut hour, should he have mounted light and delivered you with a kiss and possessed the tower? But the beldam spat between the crooked blades of shears, and put her warty hands to the sheen of your hair, and hacked it off, and maybe hacked your ears. Do you sit at the casement still, braving the ruins of your smile, but wanly? Prince there shall come not till he may climb to his kiss on a rippling ladder only. End of section 16. Section 17 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. The Vagrant. Now what can he want? The vagrant, the lout, who leers in the parson's face, lolls with tongue out. Nothing that you have, men with a motor car. God keep you your high hats and fine things that are. With a knot in his bosom and a bee in his brains, he goes full of pictures around the flat lanes. His breeches are patchy, his shirt full of thread, but the hair's plastered neat on his great hollow head. Then think you he means to harm our precious daughters? Why, gentlemen, he fishes in deeper waters. Lou Margaret, Kitty, M with the country curls are sweet bites for red lips, very fine girls. But he visits with others, with the Queen Guinevere, Troy's women, Eden's, towns not near. So leave him leering, loitering in the lanes. There's no mischief in him, but a bee in his brains. End of section 17. Section 18 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Boris of Britain. If ever your sleep goes bad, have in the chemist that Boris had. When Boris' head was blown with trouble, this man pricked the bubble. For Boris loth to take to his bed, to the cunning chemist took his head. But Boris' heart knocked louder and louder, as chemist mixed him the green powder, and he shook it, and he shook it, and with misgiving took it. How did Boris get to court? By conveyance of a sort. Hardly wood, hardly steel, beetle's wing, snail's wheel. Sprawled upon the chemist's bed, Boris lay an hour like dead. For the chemist went to look, and saw him there at 3 o'clock. So he disposeth in a book. 1 minute after, in the court, was Boris, arguing a tort. Boris in his periwig, looking learned, talking big. It was the great Boris. None could get a sweeter justice done. What did Boris do there? Got deliverance of a snare. Poison brewing at the bone exploded against the chemist's one. Too many prisoners in docks, liars in the witness box, advocates hired to the devil, fed his ingrowing evil. Accused was in a stinking tale, conceived in terror of the jail, when to the whole court's surprise, old Boris thunders, "Lies, lies!" And for not telling what he knows, old Boris smites him on the nose. Gentlemen are on their feet, Boris willing to repeat, and there's your easy barrister, as mad as the Marchmost hare, up with hate, contempt, grudge, which in the white bosom lodge. Order, order! It was not Boris too infernal hot, drew his fist and let him have it, got it back as good as gave it, went for eye and went for wig, of coward, tattler, meddler, prig. Boris darted in and knocked him, Boris laid about and crocked him, jurors, gentlemen, and clients, Neo-British bobby giants, a man by pea-green powder charmed, for down he dropped unharmed. Now the barrister is disbarred. 'Twould have hit the old Boris hard. This was not he. The wind in the head escaped when Boris dropped like lead. Boris, a single-minded man, has turned an honest publican, with a preference for quiet, but an aptitude for riot, serves the trade without deceit, and shows the merry ones the street. And as for the last named Nelly, no man has a helpfuller woman. End of section 18. Section 19 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. April Treason. So he put her in his picture of a lady he was painting, put her lips, which smiled but faintly, and her eyes, which levelled quaintly, while her length of limb and noble Roman bust, these he copied as he must. And she was a perfect model, never restless with her features, never agitating greatly, more than still and less than stately, till he knew that he could limn the dream aright in his honest northern light. He had nearly done his portrait, but there came a day in April, there was treachery come winging, on the dust of flowers springing. It was not a day for artists to play host, lest the man come uppermost, and he knew that he was changed the wintry lady. It was but their way of speaking, it was but their way of looking, but the cunning all had fled his fingertips. So he bent and kissed her lips. Then for all his giddy pulses, he laid grim hands on the picture, and he trampled it with loathing, flung it many miles to nothing, and it screamed to wake the devils as it fell till it thundered into hell. Then a silence straightway took them, and they paced the woodland homeward. What a bitter noon in April! It was April, it was April, as she touched his fleeting fingers, cold as ice, and recited, "It was nice." End of section 19. Section 20 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. First Travels of Max. As hath been, lo, these many generations, the best of the Van Vrumens was the youngest, and even he, in a chevron sailor's blouse, and tawny curls far from subdued to the cap, had slapped old Katy and betaken himself from games for children. That was because they told him never, never to set a wicked foot into Fool's Forest, where the devil dwelt. Become St. Michael's sword, said Max to the stick, and to the stone be a brand new revolver. Then Max was glad that he had armed so wisely, as darker grew the wood, and shrill with silence. All good fairies were helpless here, at night whipped in an inch of their lives, weeping, forbidden to play with strange, scared, truant little boys who didn't belong there. Snakes were allowed there, and lizards, and adders, people of age and evil that lay on their bellies and whispered. No bird, no rabbit. There were more rotten trees than there were sound ones. In that wood, timber was degenerate and rotted almost faster than it grew. There were no flowers, nor apples. Too much age. The only innocent thing in there was Max, and even he had cursed his little sisters. The black tarn rose up almost in his face. It was as black and sudden as the pit the adversary digs in the bowels of earth. Bubbles were on it, breath of the black beast, formed like a spider, white bag for entrails, who took that sort of blackness to inhabit and dangle after bad men in Fool's Forest. Might they be bad? Said casuistical Max. Mightn't a good boy who stopped saying his prayers be allowed to slip into the spider's fingers? Max raised his sword. But what can swords do against the prince of the dark? Max sheathed his point and crept around the pool. In the middle of the wood was a red witch. Max half expected her. He never expected to find a witch's house so dirty and foolish, a witch with a wide bosom, yellow as butter, or a witch combing so many obscene things from her black hair into her scarlet lap. He never believed there would attempt to sing the one that taught the rats to squeal and Bashan's bull to bellow. Littlest and last Van Vroomen, do you come too? She knew him, it appeared, would know him better, the scarlet hulk of hell with a fat bosom, pirouetting at the bottom of the forest. Certainly Max said come, but he was going, unequal contests never being commanded on young knights, only armed in innocency. When I'm a grown man, I will come here, and cut your head off. That was very well. Not a true heart beating in Christendom could have said more, but that for the present would do. Max went straight home, and nothing chilled him more than the company kept him by the witch's laugh and the witch's song and the creeping of his flesh. Max is more firmly domiciliated. A great house is Van Vroomen, a green slope, south to the sun do the great ones inhabit, and a few children play on the lawn with the nurse. Max has returned to his play, and you may find him, his famous curls unsmoothed, if you will call where the Van Vroomens live. The tribe Van Vroomen live there, at least when any are at home. End of section 20. Section 21 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Grandgousier. Dry bones, dry brains, and priest to pray. Belly that groans of its long thirst pains, It is all that remains of the Grandgousier. You fitted his muzzle, Bishop Bamboozle. Bishop Bamboozle, you voided his guzzle. You shall have crowns and angel gowns. Your delicate snout had nigh snuffed out, when the member observed 'em, bitters and stout, and cider at spout, and the wenches that served 'em. Each spidery chink was a freshet of drinkables. Clink, clink, clink was a sound of unthinkables. Your clerical ear went crack to hear. Take water and ice it, and give him, you say, lemon and slice it, sugar and spice it for Grandgousier. Weary is weary, Dr. O'Dreary, says Grandgousier. But, oh man, to be weary, mirth mad merry, at the finish of day, will you give him to guzzle, Bishop Bamboozle, a sponge from a jar of the rank vinegar, for to sip where he lies, till he ups and dies, and this is his day, till the pink-puffed eyes see the old paradise of the Grandgousier. End of section 21. Section 22 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Miss Euphemia. Out of her house she crept, which was her winter's jail, hearing the rumor that now was the birds' common tale. Birds for all the ladies, and husbands at church door. In fine, a spring was promised, as 50 years before. A phase of green and tender was on the mortal clay, but white upon her stick went Miss Euphemia, to count up all her tulips that celebrated March. Out of the furrow escaping to the blue upper arch, into her house she fled, buffeted back to prison, and sought the very great chair from which she had arisen. Down sat in her whiteness, bitter how she laughed, opening doors to March, yet quaking in its draught. Nor scarcely can she, dwindling, throw down a bridge of dream for a broken lady's traverse. Neat footing on the beam, she had too much of winter, and all her ways were lost, and she sits with us only till next Pentecost. End of section 22. Section 23 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Winter's Tale. Now the winter's frosty freight bows the tree and crowns the stump, yet sits poor Drury lone and late, watching his great cats jump. Man of oak, is this your honor, buried in a mighty house, to give your 7 cats their humor, like a plaything or a mouse? Never your brethren toiled so hard under the summer skies, but now they use their long reward, wintering not so foolish wise. Here's winter's ease, nor yet are any ladies laughing through his house, only truant thoughts of Jenny scampering through him like a mouse, Jenny tripping through his head as he met her in the wood. But Drury wonders, is afraid, if he could, or if he should, and nods, while paw and claw and fang are flashing by the ingle. Truly these be tigers young in this Kilkenny tangle. But Tom the tawny gave a cry, and he took a mighty spring to the oaken ledge, and by, like a mad free thing. And then, on seeing him go, old Drury started after, in a good 3 inch of snow, and a winter wind laughter. Look at Drury's black coat, and the kit's red jacket. Listen, Drury's great throat, in the hell cat's racket. Will you rhyme us therewhither? Oh, skipping and skating, to the bricks in the weather where the woman was waiting. She cracked open her door to the cat of Kilkenny. Here is Tom on your floor, here is Drury, good Jenny. What became of all those? Well, Jenny, she cried, Tom vanished, God knows if he lived or he died. And Drury was corrected of being long a ninny, when his wander wits contracted, and his arms took hold of Jenny. End of section 23. Section 24 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Emily Hardcastle, Spinster. We shall come tomorrow morning who are not to have her love. We shall bring no face of envy, but a gift of praise and lilies to the stately ceremonial we are not the heroes of. Let the sisters now attend her, who are red-eyed, who are wroth. They were younger, she was finer, for they wearied of the waiting, and they married them to merchants, being unbelievers both. I was dapper when I dangled in my pepper and salt. We were only local beauties, and we beautifully trusted if the proud one had to tarry, we would take her by default. But right across her threshold has the grizzled baron come. Let them wrap her as a princess who would patter down a stairway where the foreigner may take her for his gloomy halidom. End of section 24. Section 25 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Number 5. Come in out of the night, said the landlord. Hang up your caps, men, and I will pass the gin. And what for us thirsty pirates, but walk right in, me with my lips locked tight, saying not a word. 5 hang-dog men, and I was number 5. Give us a drink then, mate. It's terrible loud, and it's terrible bitter under the storm cloud, and we be blown to deader than alive. God bless strong drink that's given to the weak. 5 of us sat to the bottle, but I was one, for thinking of what so desperate had been done. I couldn't drink to my mates, lest I might speak. Here's one won't take his drink, now is he proud. This is a rummy lad, says the proprietor. Says he, I've not seen this young beauty quieter. Thinks I, now it is going to come out loud. And here comes the girl, and looks us in the face. Never she'd seen us faces more in evil, nor us great hulks with more power of the devil. But finally she sits down in the 6th place, and presses my hand. But I turn like a hare, I run to the window over the black water, thinking if I may tell them what's the matter. Happen it's dark, but I know what is down there, but open field is better. And I slide down and howl in the storm, with let for my slippery tongue, that never to girls nor priests may tell the wrong, and I run by the river where the dead things drowned. End of section 25. Section 26 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Good ships. Fleet ships encountering on the high seas who speak and unto eternity diverge. These hailed each other, poised on the loud surge of one of Mrs. Grundy's Tuesday teas, nor trimmed one sail to baffle the driving breeze. A macaroon absorbed all her emotion. His hue was ashy, but an effect of ocean. They exchanged the nautical technicalities. It was only a nothing or so, and thus they parted. Away they sailed, most certainly bound for port, so seaworthy, one felt they could not sink. Still there was a tremor shook them, I should think. Beautiful timbers, fit for stormy sport, and into miserly merchant hulks converted. End of section 26. Section 27 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Youngest daughter. Who will wed the old dame's youngest daughter? Not the sailor filled with ale, who moored his expected boat to a stake in the water, and heave-ho, unto her hulls went up for mating, but was seduced by her ill-bred lady-in-waiting, round of bosom, and not so pale. Nor the burgher's shiny boots and vest, his considered views of marriage. With her tidy scullery maid was he impressed, who kept that house from depreciation and dirt, and, blushing for the wretched state of his undershirt, he rode her home in his carriage. Nor even the grim shanks of the scholar antiquary, who was her last resort. They set him humble down in the great library, then found him compromised with a musty tome, and crying his true love therein had her home, and made him sweet sport. Heart's Desire, so her mother named her, never will wed, fair as she swore in her time. For revenge on these, the passionate Carline said, henceforth the tightest nunnery be thy tomb, thy face a fever shall burn in every head. Against thy walls incessant man shall come and claw, but may not climb. End of section 27. Section 28 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Necrological. The friar had said his paternosters duly, and scourged his limbs, and afterwards would have slept. But with much riddling his head became unruly. He arose, from the quiet monastery he crept. Dawn lightened the place where the battle had been won. The people were dead. It is easy, he thought, to die. These dead remained, but the living all were gone, gone with the wailing trumps of victory. The dead men wore no raiment against the air. Bartholomew's men had spoiled them where they fell. In defeat the heroes' bosoms were whitely bare. The field was white like meads of asphodel. Not all were white, some gory and fabulous, whom the sword had pierced, and then the grey wolf eaten. But the brother reasoned that hero's flesh was thus. Flesh fails, and the postured bones lie weather-beaten. The lords of chivalry were prone and shattered, the gentle and the bodyguard of yeomen. Bartholomew's stroke went home, but little it mattered. Bartholomew went to be stricken of other foemen. Beneath the blue ogive of the firmament was a dead warrior, clutching whose mighty knees was a leman, who with her flame had warmed his tent, for him enduring all men's pleasantries. Close by the sable stream that purged the plain lay the white stallion and his rider thrown. The great beast had spilled there his little brain, and the little groin of the knight was spilled by a stone. The youth possessed him then of a crooked blade, deep in the belly of a lugubrious knight. He fingered it well, and it was cunningly made, but strange apparatus was it for a Carmelite. Then he sat upon a hill and hung his head, riddling, and lost in a vast surmise, and so still that he likened himself unto those dead whom the kites of heaven solicited with sweet cries. End of section 28. Section 29 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Armageddon. Antichrist, playing his lissom flute, and merry as was his wont, debauched upon the plain. Then came a swirl of dust, and Christ drew rein, brooding upon his frugal breviary. Now which shall die, the Randall, Rose, and Hall, or else the tonsured beadsman monkery? For Christ and Antichrist arm cap a pee. The prospect charms the soul of the lean jackal. But Antichrist got down from the Barbary beast, and doffed his plume in courteous prostration. Christ left his Jeanette's back in deprecation, and raised him, his own hand about his waist. And then they fingered chivalry's quaint page, of precedents discoursing by the letter. The oratory of Antichrist was better. He invested Christ with the elder lineage. He set Christ on his own Mahomet's back, where Christ sat fortressed up like Diomede. A cynical hairy Jeanette was his steed, obtuse and most indifferent in attack. The lordings measured lances and stood still, and each was loath to let the other's blood. Originally they were one brotherhood. There stood the white pavilion on the hill, nor were they hacked and harried to their boot. Men die when wounds insufferable are got. These plagued with immortality could not when grim Lord Ares trod them underfoot. To the white pavilion went the hierarchs, if they might truce their honorable dispute. Firm was the Christian's chin, and he was mute, and Antichrist ejected scant remarks. Antichrist tendered a spray of rosemary to serve his brother for a buttonhole. Then Christ about his adversary's pole wrapped a dry poem inscribed Mount Calvary. Christ wore a dusty cassock, and the night did him the honors of his tiring hall, whence Christ did not come forth too finical, but his egregious beauty richly dight. With feasting they concluded every day, and when the other shaped his phrases thicker, Christ, introducing water in the liquor, made wine of more ethereal bouquet. At wassail Antichrist would pitch the strain for unison of all the retinue. Christ beat the time and hummed a stave or two, but did not say the words which were profane. Perruquiers were privily presented, till knowing his need extreme, and his heart pure, Christ let them dress him his thick chevelure, and soon his beard was glozed and sweetly scented. And so the wolf said brother to the lamb, the true heir keeping with the poor impostor, the rubric and the holy paternoster were jangled strangely with the dithyramb. It could not be. There was a patriarch, a godly liege of old malignant brood, who could not fathom the new brotherhood between the children of the light and dark. He sought the ear of Christ on these mad things, and in the white pavilion when he stood, and saw them featured and dressed like twins at food, he poured in the wrong ear his misgivings. He was discomfited, but Christ much more. Christ shed unmannerly his devil's pelf, took ashes from the hearth, and smeared himself, called for his smock and Jeanette as before. His trump recalls his own to right opinions. With scourge they mortify their carnal selves. With stone they whet the axe heads on the helves, and seek the prince Beelzebub and minions. Christ and his myrmidons, Christ at the head, chanted of death and glory and no complacence. Antichrist and the armies of malfeasance made songs of innocence and no bloodshed. The immortal adversary shook his head. If now they fought too long, then he would famish, and if much blood was shed, why, he was squeamish. These Armageddons weary me much, he said. End of section 29. Section 30 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Epitaph. Napoleon took many captures, and is dead. Julius brought unto Rome many victories, nor did Alexander expire on a wastrel's bed. But this was a somewhat greater captain than these. He took a city too, O eminences. It was a city reared stubborn against a foe. Furnished it was with no frail few defences, but it fell to the intrepid generissimo. Its 2 towers compacted of a tough masonry, the right tower squat against the thunderbolts of heaven, the left tower sheer on the brink like a mighty tree from the bottom of hell, and terrible to the craven. He was a lone besieger of a grim defense. He was scarred, and weary of circling it, round after round, he battered incessantly upon its fundaments. At last he bestrode it, thundering to the ground. A lone besieger, so Caesar's ghost had said, leading no soldiers, but he had known black magic, and mustered invisible regiments to his aid, for he triumphed, and the envious Caesars took it as tragic. End of section 30. Section 31 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Judith of Bethulia. Beautiful as the flying legend of some leopard, she had not yet chosen her great captain or prince depositary to our flesh and our defense, and a wandering beauty is a blade out of its scabbard. You know how dangerous, gentlemen of 60. May you know it yet 10 more. Nor by process of veiling she grew the less fabulous. Gray or blue veils, we were desperate to study the invincible emanations of her white body, and the winds at her ordained raiment were ominous. Might she walk in the market, sit in the council of soldiers, only of the extreme elders? But a rare chance was the girl's then, when the invader trumpeted from the south and rumbled from the north, beleaguered the city from 4 quarters of the earth, our soldiery too craven and sick to aid her, where were the arms could countervail his horde. Her beauty was the sword. She sat with the elders, and proved on their blear visage how bright was the weapon unrusted in her keeping, while he lay surfeiting on their harvest heaping, wasting the husbandry of their rarest vintage, and dreaming of the broad-breasted dames for concubine. These floated on his wine. He was lapped with bay leaves, and grass, and fumiter weed, and from under the wine film encountered his mortal vision. For even within his tent she accomplished his derision. She loosed one veil and another, standing unafraid, and he perished, nor brushed her with even so much as a daisy. She found his destruction easy. The heathen are all perished. The victory was furnished. We smote them hiding in our vineyards, barns, annexes, and now their white bones clutter the holes of foxes in the chieftain's head with grinning sockets and varnished. Is it hung on the sky with a hideous epitaphy? No, the woman keeps the trophy. May God send unto the virtuous lady her prince. It is stated she went reluctant to that orgy, yet a madness fevers our young men, and not the clergy nor the elders have turned them unto modesty since, inflamed by the thought of her naked beauty with desire, yes, and chilled with fear and despair. End of section 31. Section 32 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Conrad sits in twilight. Conrad, Conrad, aren't you old to sit so late in your moldy garden? And I think Conrad knows it well, nursing his knees, too roomy and cold to warm the wraith of a forest of Arden. Neuralgia in the back of his neck, his lungs filling with such miasma, his feet dipping in leafage and muck. Conrad, you've forgotten asthma. Conrad's house has thick red walls, and chips on Conrad's hearth are blazing. Slippers and pipe and tea are served. Butter and toast, Conrad, are pleasing. Still Conrad's back is not uncurved, and here's an autumn on him teasing. Autumn days in our section are the most used up thing on earth, or in the waters under the earth, having no more color nor predilection than cornstalks too wet for the fire, a ribbon rotting on the byre, a man's face as weathered as straw by the summer's flare and the winter's flaw. End of section 32. Section 33 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Nocturne. Where now is the young Adam, sultry in his Aden? And where is the goat-footed, pursuing his naked maiden? Our man shall cut few capers in his dark seersucker coat, his grave eye subduing the outrageous red tie at his throat, considering if he should carry his dutiful flesh to the ball, rather than open his book, which is flat and metaphysical. The centuries have blown hard, and dried his blood unto this dark quintessence of manhood. Much water has passed the bridges fretfully, and borne his boats of passion to the sea. There is no storm in this dusk, but a distant flash over the foamy sea where the great floods wash. But still the plum tree blooms despite the rocks at its root, despite that everyone knows by now its wizened and little fruit. And the white moon plunges wildly. It is a most ubiquitous ghost, always seeking her own old people that are long time lost, till he is almost persuaded, and perhaps he would go to the ball, if he had the heart and the head, for a furious antique bacchanal. End of section 33. Section 34 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Blackberry Winter. If the lady hath any loveliness, let it die. For being drunken with the steam of Cuban cigars, I find no pungence in the odor of stars, and all my music goes out of me on a sigh. But still would I sing to my maidenly apple tree, before she has borne me a single apple of red. The pictures of silver and apples of gold are dead, but one more apple ripeneth yet, maybe. The garnished house of the daughter of heaven is cold. I have seen her often. She stood all night on the hill. Fiercely the pale youth clambered to her till, hoarsely the rooster awakened him, footing the mould. The breath of a girl is music, fall and swell. Your trumpets convolve in the warrior's chambered ear. But I have listened, there is no one breathing here, and all of the wars have dwindled since Troy fell. But still I will haunt beneath my apple tree, heedful again to star-looks and windwards, anxious for the flash of whether eyes or swords, and hoping a little, that either may be. End of section 34. Section 35 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Lichas de Polydor, who regretted all his years of serving Cytherea. Her huge affirmative emblazed thy sodden skies. It was a sign had puffed up great the mortaless worm that dies. But now thou knowest her sworn a spinster, and her true tokens lies. Rained her endearments, thick as snow, and covered thee. Thy prayer was not appeased. Naked and unrewarded must thou flee. Not so had served thee Thalia, Charis, or Melpomene. Much better marriages thou hadst, becoming to thy station. Remember the powerful ladies, unreluctant to thy passion, thou less than the bandy-legged of the heathen congregation. End of section 35. Section 36 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Spiel of the three Mountebanks, the swarthy one. Villagers who gather round, this is Fides, my lean hound. Bring your bristled village curs to try his fang and tooth, sweet sirs. He will rend them, he is savage, thinking nothing but to ravage, nor with cudgel, fire, rope, may ye control my misanthrope. He would tear the moon in the sky, and fly at heaven, could he fly. And for his ravening, without cease, I have had of him no peace. Only once I bared the knife, to quit my devil of his life. But listen, how I heard him say, think you I shall die today? Since your mother cursed and died, I am keeping at your side. We are firmly knit together, two ends tugging at one tether, and you shall see when I shall die, that you are mortal even as I. Bring your stoutest hearted curs, if ye would risk him, gentle sirs. The thick one. Countrymen, here's a noble frame. Humphrey is my elephant's name. When my father's back was bent under steep impediment, Humphrey came to my possession, with patient strength for all his passion. Have ye a mountain to remove? It is Humphrey's dearest love. Pile his burden to the skies, loose a pestilence of flies, foot him in the quick morass, where no laden beast can pass. He will staunch his weariless back, and march unswerving on the track. Have ye seen a back so wide, so impenetrable hide? Nor think ye by this Humphrey hill Prince Hamlet bare his fardels ill. Myself I like it not for us to wear beneath an incubus. I take offence, but in no rage may I dispose my heritage, though in good time the vast and tough shall sink and totter soon enough. So pile your population up, they are a drop in Humphrey's cup. Add all your curses to his pack, to make one straw for Humphrey's back. The pale one. If ye remark how poor I am, come, citizens, behold my lamb. Have ye a lion, ounce, or scourge, or any beast of dainty gorge? Agnes lays his tender youth between the very enemy's mouth, and though he sniff his delicate meat, he may not bruise that flesh nor eat, he may not rend him limb from limb, if Agnes do but bleat on him. Fierce was my youth, but like a dream I saw a temple and a stream, and where I knelt and washed my sore, this infant lamb stood on the shore. He mounted with me from the river, and still he cries, as brave as ever, lay me down by the lion's side, to match my frailty with his pride. Fain would I welter in my blood, to teach these lions true lionhood. So daily Agnes would be slain, but daily is denied again. And still the hungry lions range, while Agnes waits upon a change. Only the coursing lions die, and in their deserts mortify. So bring us lion, leopard, bear, to try of Agnes without fear. And ye less gentle than I am, come, be instructed of my lamb. End of section 36. Section 37 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Night Voices. By night and inky fog, unseen they hoped of all the synagogue. Two pale, high-fronted youths withdrew apart, upheaving each his bitterness of heart in a dark duologue. I have the whole here, say. They titled thee a little god today, but didst thou promise to annul the tomb, complacent with that frighted breed to whom thou fellowest in clay? I sped their tremulous hope for pity of their darkling horoscope. For thou art Nicodemus, and thy sect have schooled them so venereal, O stiff-necked, ye stinted all their scope. Our order doth not use to ease them with false tidings of good news. Our fashion is a jealous elder god, who tempereth sometimes his chastening rod, but raiseth no dead Jews. Ye slay the cripple's hope, who would but slough their warty envelope, the meek laborious who would mirth and play, the tight-lipped righteous travailing for that day when rock-bound graves may ope. Friend, these lies profit not, when carcasses so visibly do rot, as well run forth and cry, there is no Rome. Still would the legionaries scourge them home, though they had fain forgot. Nay, this hope lasteth more, and maketh the mortal mark bite not so sore. Our Jewry is fanatic, and I said, in 3 days must each tomb unclasp his dead, nor heard such joy before. Take heed, high-hearted youth, for they will kill thee, save thou speak them sooth. And they will say, attentive to thy grave, the little carpenter's promises were brave, but carrion telleth truth. O dogma'd Pharisee, the hope I startle flitteth wide of me. Suppose in thy turn thou shouldest firmly swear that I had cleft the tomb and breathed the air, would it not flutter free? And further on they walked, out of old passion in the heart they talked, and when the grey morn glimmered overhead, they found they trod the gardens of the dead, and spectre white they stalked. End of section 37. Section 38 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Adventure this side of pluralism. Angered with a braggart kind, prescribing others to its yoke, and seeming jauntily designed, I rent my smooth locks, and I spoke. Lordly, have ye intimations, a more excellent pedigree, that ye taint the other stations with the limp of bastardy? Can ye outscream the peahen, or outspring the springbok, or scare away the wind and rain with shibboleth or fockamafock? Rear ye prouder than a stallion, creep ye lower than a snail, as ye tread your suave cotillion, satyrs in a swallow tail. But like his brethren fall apart, and who can tie the miscellany? Plato, Scythian, dog, and wart. One is one, but these be many. There was an ancient man withal, doctor of genealogy, with wisdom on his red eyeball, who heard and answered me. His daughters wedded with the plague, his pigeons wiven of the fox, all the jewels in his bag gone in shipwreck on the rocks. With none to mind or mourn, he sat beneath his locust tree, but he saw my visage torn, and lifted up his voice to me. Aforetime there was one God only, Simplex was his name, none other. Ah, but simplicity was lonely, nothing saying Father, feudal heart without a fief, empty imperator, Rex, Java, Allah, Indian chief, pontiff, mandarin, multiplex. Where were the singers of his state, who were the largest of his loins, unless he mightily begat other gods, many sons? The vague moon and the fierce sun, lampless in the deathy quiet, pricked his countenance, waiting on the whisper of the fiat. The fir tree quivering in her vase, and the hop toad in his kettle, and a lady's lovely face, and the tight-suited beetle. Out of joy they took their form, joyous they came forth and sped, both the able-bellied worm and immaculate biped. They were patterned prettily, and of love, and even so their young mouths cried terribly, Ego, ego, ego. If he wrought them for obeisance, Simplicissimus missed his mark, too promiscuous of his essence, obsolescent hierarch, for the stark, prime, simple, when he multiplied his one, shared the holies of his temple, and conveyed his throne. Some may have returned him praise, I, who bended a good knee, as a novice in those days, to my mad aunt Piety. Have you heard the Ave sung? Here's the cuckoo, bull, and fife, lark's bill, and Cicero's tongue, loud of lustihood and strife. And his messengers, the sons, perfect clerks and bibliophiles, are stubborn, hot automatons, running out their rebel wills. Phoebe vibrant in the tree, running water, April pigments, mirrors changing endlessly. We are wholes and not fragments. Man was the youngest child, and knew the sun, then its own father. It was thoroughly beguiled, of its own image rather, and the mere spied weed, with its red heart perfect centered. I am ultimate indeed, and a god well accoutred. The free hearts and free lances, man and beast and thingdom, we unnatural princes will parcel out his kingdom. My son, the motley and the pied, the swarming and oblivious brood, are swimming deep in fratricide, being brother and sisterhood. So tell those dignities respective, noses counted to 400, tribes and orators invective, whom they slay are kindred. End of section 38. Section 39 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. On the road to Wockensutter. Sahara doth not keep her livid hell wholly unto herself, writes Herodote. Sirocco scourgeth even the Greenlands well. The pulver of her brimstone scratched my throat. Brady had little Latin and less Greek. Not his to verify the obscure quotation, but Brady knew no waterfall, nor creek, nor arctic tremor stayed his oxidation. By 60 fiery miles they call a trail, Red Hole communicates with Wockensutter. Here Brady, who had started on a rail, pursued his march, diminishing like butter. For Brady had deployed the manifold beneath the sacred principle of Venus, but desert ladies named him greasy and old, and the empaneled peers pronounced it heinous. She is a verity, else all is knit, cried Brady, his faith quivering with outrage, and saw the yellow-feathered pert peewit, who flashed upon the acrid sea of sage. Noon of the second day made his ascension. The Brady marched and blistered at the goal, and to the peewit made offensive mention of words that scored the tablets of her soul. A simple shotgun with a choke were best, says Brady, looking for a place to sit. But, as long eluded of bird Helen's breast, he adds, could any human engine hit? For you again are Venus, I suppose. I have your evidences of shape and feather, and no man more impatient ever rose to see you turn to nothing altogether. And though I had a miracle of salt to sprinkle on your saucy tilt of tail, I think I'd rather loose you in default than catch another mere obscene female. End of section 39. Section 40 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Prometheus in Straits. Garrulous gentlemen on a veranda, bibbers or non-bibbers of illicit potations, rehearsing the acta and the agenda of Republican or Democratic administrations. I am not committed to taking memoranda culled from the lucene of your cerebrations. And now approaches the radiant band, all spinster, white spirits weaving a delirious rhythm of chatter of picture galleries and of Westminster. But my sad, alas, insensitivity is too utter. I tend you as some tired jungle monster. The parrots' bonnets are annulled by the tedium of their twitter. To the library, then, and the masterpieces? Not now, though I risk the damage of your inference, for before your alterations respect ceases, the glowing centers you have laid over with absurd circumference. Indeed, you have undone them with exegesis, and provoke me to a gesture not of deference. Though I be Prometheus, my wits wandered to bring my pious offices unto this people, where all must be the teachers. Nullity is engendered. My doctrine perishes crying for an ear that is simple. The prophet is solicited before he has well thundered, and escapes with credit if he do not turn disciple. My function concerns itself, however, with this planet. My act is simple as an incident of vegetation. I will go, then, to a stream-side abounding with granite, or gaunt place with no history nor human condition, and, having unbuttoned myself, erect an altar on it, and comfort my knees with red bruises of prostration. End of section 40. Section 41 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Plea in mitigation. You have heard something muttered in my scorn. A little learning addleth this man's wit. He crieth on our dogmas counterfeit. And no man's bubble scapeth his sharp thorn, nor he respecteth duly our tall steeple, but solitary poring on his book, heareth our noise, and hardly offereth look, nor liveth neighborly with these the people. With reason, friends, I am complained upon, who am a headstrong man, sentenced from birth to love unusual gods beyond all earth, and the easy gospels bruited hither and yon, So I bring hurt upon mine own sweet kin, and on my scholars, the young simple snails, treading their tumuli to holy grails, I make reproach, then my deep grief sets in. But friends, acquit me of that stain of pride. Much has been spoken solemnly together, and you have heard my heart, so answer whether I am so proud a fool and godless beside. Sages and friends, too often have you seen us deep in the midnight conclave as we used. For my part, reverently were you perused, no rank and primacy being hatched between us. For my part, much beholden to you all, giving a little and receiving more. Learning had stuffed this head with but lean lore, betwixt the front bone and the occipital. Anatomy, that dulled my dubious features, had housed within me, close to my breastbone, my demon, always clamoring, up, be gone, pursue your gods faster than most of creatures. And if an alien, hideously at feud with those my generation, I have reason to think to salve the fester of my treason, a 7 of friends exceeds much multitude. End of section 41. Section 42 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Tom, Tom, the piper's son. Grim in my little black coat, as the sleazy beetle, and gone of hue, lonely, a man reputed for softening little, loving few, mournfully going where men assemble, unfriended, pushing with laborious wares, and glaring with little grey eyes at whom I am brushing, who would with theirs. Full of my thoughts, as I trudge here and trundle yonder, eyes on the ground, tricked by white birds or tall women into no wonder, and no sound, yet privy to great dreams, and secret and vain glory, and hot and proud, and poor and bewildered, and longing to hear my own story rehearsed aloud. How I have passed, involved in these chances and choices, by certain trees whose tiny attent oracles receive the true voices of the wordless breeze, and against me the counsels of spirits were not then darkened who thereby house, as I set my boots to the path beneath them, and hearkened to the talking boughs. How one said, this ambulant worm, he is strangely other than they suppose, but one, he was sired by his father, and damned by his mother, and acknowledges those. And then, nay, nay, this man is a changeling, and knows not. This was a prince from a far great kingdom, and should return, but goes not, long years since. But like a king I was subject to a king's condition, and I marched on, not testing at eavesdrop the glory of my suspicion, and the talkers were gone. And duly appeared I on the very clock-throb appointed in the litten room, nor was hailed with that love that leaps to the air anointed. Hush, hush, he is come. End of section 42. Section 43 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Old Man Playing with Children. A discreet householder exclaims on the grandsire in war paint and feathers, with fierce grandsons and axes, dancing around a backyard fire of boxes. Watch, grandfather, he'll set the house on fire. But I will unriddle for you the thought of his mind, an old one you cannot open with conversation. What animates those thin legs in risky motion? Mixes the snow on the head with snow on the wind. Grandson, grandsire, we are equally boy and boy. Do not offer me your reclining chair and slippers with tedious old women talking in wrappers. This life is not good, but in danger and in joy. It is you who are elder to these and younger to me, that are pinned as slaves by your properties and causes, and never walk out of your shaped, insupportable houses, and shamefully, when boys shout, go in and flee. God forgive me, I know too well your middling ways, having taken care and performed ignominies unreckoned between the first brief childhood and the brief second, but I will be more honorable in these days. End of section 43. Section 44 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Captain Carpenter. Captain Carpenter rose up in his prime, put on his pistols, and went riding out, but had got well nigh nowhere at that time, till he fell in with ladies in a rout. It was a pretty lady, in all her train, that played with him so sweetly, but before an hour she'd taken a sword, with all her main, and twined him of his nose for evermore. Captain Carpenter mounted up one day, and rode straightway into a stranger rogue, that looked unchristian, but be that as may, the captain did not wait upon prologue, but drew upon him out of his great heart. The other swung against him with a club, and cracked his 2 legs at the shinny part, and let him roll and stick like any tub. Captain Carpenter rode many a time, from male and female took he sundry harms. He met the wife of Satan, crying, I'm the she-wolf bids you shall bear no more arms. Their strokes and counters whistled in the wind. I wish he had delivered half his blows, but where she should have made off like a hind, the bitch bit off his arms at the elbows. And Captain Carpenter parted with his ears to a black devil that used them in this wise. O Jesus, ere his 70 years, another had plucked out his sweet blue eyes. Captain Carpenter got up on his roan, and sallied from the gate in hell's despite. I heard him asking in the grimmest tone, if any enemy yet there was to fight. To any adversary it is fame, if he risks to be wounded by my tongue, or burnt in 2 beneath my red heart's flame, such are the perils he is cast among. But if he can, he has a pretty choice, from an anatomy with little to lose, whether he cut my tongue and take my voice, or whether it be my round red heart he choose. It was the neatest knave that ever was seen, stepping in perfume from his lady's bower, who at this word put in his merry mien, and fell on Captain Carpenter like a tower. I would not knock old fellows in the dust, but there lay Captain Carpenter on his back. His weapons were the old heart in his bust, and a blade shook between rotten teeth alack. The rogue in scarlet and grey soon knew his mind, he wished to get his trophy and depart. With gentle apology and touch refined, he pierced him and produced the captain's heart. God's mercy rest on Captain Carpenter now. I thought him, sirs, an honest gentleman, citizen, husband, soldier, and scholar enow. Let jangling kites eat of him if they can. But God's deep curses follow after those that shore him of his goodly nose and ears, his legs and strong arms at the 2 elbows, and eyes that had not watered 70 years. The curse of hell upon the sleek upstart, who got the captain finally on his back, and took the red vitals of his heart, and made the kites to wet their beaks clack, clack. End of section 44. Section 45 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. These winters. Time was when the gods we gentlemen deride visited us with winters that were cold, and I could assist at 1,000 stories told of black turned white, and flood solidified, all but the red, which was at early tide, and of our smoky breath that stained the air, as we slipped like rose between the earth and the sky, and, out of ourselves with glory, made outcry. But the little devils of sense were frozen where there was such purity of atmosphere. And were we ever driven into house, we were the brave who would be purified, and the great weather was emptied on our pride. But whether, or we have changed, for we make mows at the present gods, and say, where nows, and are diverted in our tepid ease, with asking if the gods, as we are told, will blot the sun with such a pall of cold, that gentlemen pink and slippered, even as these, shall dance like locusts on the winter breeze. End of section 45. Section 46 of Chills and Fever by Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Old Mansion. As an intruder, I trudged with careful innocence to mask decently a quite meddlesome stare, passing the old house often on its eminence, exhaling my foreign weed on its weighted air. Here age seemed newly imaged for the historian after his monstrous chateau on the Loire, a beauty not for depicting by old vulgarian reiterations which gentle readers abhor. Each time of seeing, I absorbed some other feature of a house whose annals in no wise could be brief nor ignoble, for it expired as sweetly as nature, with her tinge of oxidation on autumn leaf. It was a southern manor. One need hardly imagine towers, white monoliths, or even ivied walls, but sufficient state if its peacock was a pigeon, where no courts kept, but grave rites and funerals. Indeed, not distant, possibly not external to the property, were tombstones, where the catafalque had carried their dead, and projected a note too charnel, but for the honeysuckle, on its intricate stalk. Stability was the character of its rectangle, whose line was seen in part, and guessed in part, through trees. Decay was the tone of old brick and shingle. Green blinds, dragging, frightened the watchful heart to assert, your mansion, long and richly inhabited, its exits and entrances suiting the children of men, will not forever be thus, O man, exhibited, and one had best hurry to enter it if one can. And at last, with my happier angel's own temerity, did I clang their brazen knocker against the door, to beg their dole of a look in simple charity, or the crumbs of legend dropping from their great store. But it came to nothing, and may such gross denial which has been deplored duly with a beating of the breast never shorten the tired historian, loyal to acknowledge defeat and discover a new quest. The old mistress was ill, and sent my dismissal by one even more rapid and lean and dark than that warped concierge and imperturbable vassal, who bids you be gone from her master's Gothic park. Emphatically, the old house crumbled. The ruins would litter, as already the leaves, this petted sward. But no analyst went in to the lord or the peons. The antiquary would finger the bits of shard. But on retreating, I saw myself, in the token, how loving from my foreign weed the feather curled on the languid air, and I went with courage shaken to dip, alas, into some unseemlier world. End of section 46. Section 47 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Inland City. She lies far inland, and no stick nor stone of her ever has looked on the sounding sea. And how should she speak of her swift barks and roadways, and white sloops crowding to lift and be free? Ye towers and steeples, and belfries and crosses, toll for the doomed ships passing to sea, but ye walls and gateposts, and ye halls and gardens, moor in my little boats vigilantly. End of section 47. Section 48 of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christopher Freed. Philomela. Procne, Philomela, and Italus, your names are liquid, your improbable tale is recited in the classic numbers of the nightingale. Ah, but our numbers are not felicitous, it goes not liquidly for us. Perched on a Roman ilex, and duly apostrophized, the nightingale descanted unto Ovid. She has even appeared to the Teutons, the Swilled and Gravid. At Fontainebleau, it may be the bird was Gallicized, never was she baptized. To England came Philomela with her pain, fleeing the hawk her husband. Querulous ghost, she wanders when he sits heavy on his roost, utters herself in the original again, the untranslatable refrain. Not to thee shore she came, this other Thrace, environ barbarous to the royal attic. How could her delicate dirge run democratic, delivered in a cloudless, boundless public place, to an inordinate race? I pernoctated with the Oxford students once, and in the quadrangles, in the cloisters, on the Cher, precociously knocked at antique doors ajar, fatuously touched the hems of the hierophants, sick of my dissonance. I went out to Bagley Wood, I climbed the hill, even the moon had slanted off in a twinkling. I heard the sepulchral owl, and a few bells tinkling. There was no more villainous day to unfulfill. The diurnity was still. Up from the darkest wood where Philomela sat, her fairy numbers issued. What then ailed me? My ears are called capacious, but they failed me. Her classics registered a little flat. I rose and venomously spat. Philomela, Philomela, lover of song, I am in despair if we may make us worthy, a bantering breed, sophistical and swarthy, unto more beautiful persistently more young thy fabulous provinces belong. End of section 48. End of Chills and Fever by John Crowe Ransom.